Dames en heren, mag ik u verzoeken om plaats te nemen en liefst, ik zou zelf zeggen, zo ver mogelijk naar voren te komen. Dat is zoveel te gezelliger voor onze spreker die als allerlaatste aan bod komt, maar het is absoluut niet van de minste. Mag ik u verzoeken om snel naar voren te komen, dames en heren, en om plaats te nemen. En ik herhaal het nog eens, voel u vrij om zo ver mogelijk vooraan te komen zitten. Want ik zie dat er toch al wel wat mensen vertrokken zijn, wat een iets leger beeld geeft van de kerk. Het is wel zo dat de meeste kerken helemaal leeglopen tegenwoordig. Wij zouden graag hebben dat deze vandaag nog heel even vol mag lopen. Kom gerust helemaal vooraan zitten. Ik weet dat ik in herhaling val, maar ik zie nog een aantal mensen binnenkomen. Welkom terug, allemaal. In het laatste deel van deze tweede dag van de Reizen naar Morgen Summit hebben wij voor u nog een hoogst interessante spreker. Andrew Sims is both a political economist as well as a compelling storyteller with a comprehensive understanding of the challenges we're facing and how they are interconnected. He has made it his business to find out not just if we can make the type of changes required to avoid climate breakdown, but whether we can do so at the speed and scale needed. Making sure that we are asking the right questions is a step forward. For instance, what is holding us back from aiming higher or thinking more boldly? Andrew Sims will talk about tourism from the perspective of change, discussing the transition from the old economic model to the new. Ladies and gentlemen, give him a warm welcome. Andrew Sims.
A slight terrifying photograph I saw of myself. I didn't realize my head was so big. That was probably taken before I took up running. Anyway, I've been waiting for 2 days to get the chance to come and stand here and say, dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. Look, my shirt, I've almost got a white collar. I could pull it off. I could definitely pull it off. Anyway, congratulations on making it this far as well. You've done incredibly well to make it to Friday afternoon while the sun is shining outside. The thing about speaking last at an event like this is that you spend the previous 2 days sat with your notes, listening to all the other presentations, with a pen, striking through all the things which have already been said, which I've been doing for the last 2 days. And what I've got left written on my piece of paper is, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. So I think we'll move straight to questions. Anyway, it is really nice to be here. And it's really nice to be here because you might have noticed, you can probably tell from my accent that I come from England. You might have noticed from watching the news that there's been a few, we've been having a bit of trouble with our attitude to Europe recently. So it's especially nice to be here because I don't know if I will ever be allowed in again, depending upon what happens at home. But while I've been listening to you, I want to say thank you for asking the right kind of questions. And I want to say thank you for being sort of open and showing some sort of leadership on this issue. And part of the answer, as we've been hearing, is all about finding well-being, quality of life. The wonderful word that was used in one of the early presentations about resonance, as one speaker said yesterday. And I have to say that on arriving in Bruges, one thing brought me more joy than anything else. And that is learning that people from this city are known as Bruggelings. I can't tell you how good that sounds in English. My little Bruggelings. So good. That said, as we're sort of setting out to seek distinctiveness, a sense of place, character, connection, locality. My instruction on arriving at the train station in Bruges was, meet me outside Starbucks. So I think we can do better on that one next time. You can see from my little slide up there that I'm kind of representing a new international alliance called the Rapid Transition Alliance. A little strapline is evidence-based hope in a warming world. The website is rapidtransition.org, and if you go there, you will find lots and lots of case studies about change happening in the world at the kind of speed and scale that the science is now telling us is necessary. Because we have this extraordinary challenge of facing climate change down in less than 12 years. And you know, the more real these deadlines become, in some senses, the more desperate we seek easy ways out. The number of times I turn on the television news to see some new tech entrepreneur talking about how we might escape into space and go and inhabit and set up a colony on a rock somewhere off in the solar system. The most recent one in the news a couple of days ago, the great news that water has been found on a planet called K218b, which is great. Apparently it can support life. There's just one tiny little problem with it. That's if you used our sort of only available technology. You wanted to take a kind of a space shuttle to get there. I worked it out the other day. It would take you about 4,100,000 years to get there. So I think our challenge is to sort things out here on Earth first. And we've already heard this incredible array of ideas, this brilliant visions and examples from all around the world. We've heard from Anna and Daniel and Michelle and Rob, and there really is only kind of so much more to say. And you're all expert in areas of the hospitality sector and the tourist sector in a way that I'm not. But I do find it kind of ironic that, as the great theologian Blaise Pascal once said, that all of humanity's problems stem from mankind's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. There was a great book written by a writer called Alain de Botton called The Art of Travel. And in it, he recounts the tale of the fictional Duc d'Essiente. Apologies if that's not the right pronunciation. And that's from J.K. Huysman's novel Against Nature. Now, the Duke lives in Paris and he dreads travel. And then he has his imagination gripped for a trip to London by reading travel books. So he plans his trip and he arrives at the Gare Saint-Lazare in Paris, and he pauses at an English pub. And he sits in the English pub and absorbs the smells and the atmosphere and the English expat clientele. So he travels to England in his mind. And then he pauses and he thinks about all the logistics of going on his journey, queuing at the train station, making sure he's got a kind of a packed lunch. He thinks about the unknown beds that he'll have to sleep in. And he thinks, oh, stuff this. I think I'm going to stay at home. And he says, I must have been suffering some mental aberration to have believed that it was necessary, interesting, and useful to travel abroad. And, you know, maybe, just maybe, one of the answers to some of our problems is that we do actually need to travel in our minds a little bit more. But as we know, the Duke is in a minority, and regardless, we do travel in growing numbers, and our challenge is how we make travel and tourism as sectors, not just things that don't add to humanity's problems, so to speak, but might become active agents in solving them. You know, the UN, as we heard, the big statistics, the UN calls tourism an economic and social phenomenon. We know that the growth in tourism has been outstripping the growth in conventional trade, trade in stuff, trade in goods. And it represents possibilities, but also problems. You know, there is the growth in the experience economy that we've been hearing about. Economically, potentially, that's a good thing. But not if it's just additional to everything else that we're doing. And when it's linked to highly polluting behavior like flying, where the absolute material weight, heaviness of the economy outstrips other such shifts and improvements in efficiency. So those humanity's problems that we face, the climate crisis probably looms largest of all. Now, if we're to meet the internationally agreed climate target of stopping warming going above 1.5 degrees, we now have a pretty good idea of what that means for each of us individually in terms of our own emissions. We've got to get our emissions down to about 2.5 tons by 2030, about 1.4 by 2040, and 0.7 by 2050. Now, those are numbers that's quite hard to put into context. But to put that into perspective, if you took a single return flight from London to Los Angeles, you'd be responsible for about 2.6 tons of carbon dioxide emissions. And that's traveling in economy, which means that you would already have used up in that single act your entire carbon budget for the year and then some more, leaving you unable to even turn the kettle on or do anything else that required the use of carbon-driven energy. Now, what we know, we've been looking at some of what this means in practice for the United Kingdom. Now, for us to meet our targets, to get reduction rates which are high enough both to lead to a zero carbon economy by 2050 and to remain within the carbon budget that we have left, it means we've got to hit reductions of about 95% by the year 2030. As the IPCC put it, this means rapid, far-reaching, and unprecedented changes in all areas of society. But of course, these aren't the only problems we have to face. We've got to deal with inequality and the hard politics that it's been driving. We've got to deal with the fact that since the 1970s, in almost all of the advanced industrialized economies, inequality has been growing. And we've got to deal with things like the well-being crisis, the crisis of mental health, the growth of loneliness. Now, I want to say, at this point, don't worry. You don't have to kind of solve all these problems on your own. But two things. You've got to make sure that you're not making the problems worse, and even better, to see whether you can become part of the solution. Because asking how to reimagine this sector is really just another way of asking, how should we live in the world? So if you're considering any transformation or transition, keep these three things in mind. Will what you do move the dial in the right direction to reduce our ecological footprint, to reduce inequality, and to raise our well-being? At which point, I give Belgium a little pat on the back for doing rather well in the World Happiness Report in 2019. Okay, you did come below Costa Rica, but you came ahead of the United States and France. So, well done. And crucially, where the first of these three issues is concerned, the ecological footprint, will we make those changes fast enough to not tip over the climate cliff? Can we make the rapid transitions that we need? This is a little picture from an artist called John Martin, painted in about 1828. It's of, it's a little bit apocalyptic. It's of Herculaneum and Pompeii disappearing under a volcanic eruption. That's just an oblique way of making the point that even something as unexpected as plate tectonic activity leading to volcanoes is worsened by climate change because of the loss of ice cover and emergence of the ground. But things are happening. In just 8 months, as of the end of last month, there were 985 jurisdictions around the world in 18 countries, representing over 200 million people, who have declared a climate emergency. That's in less than a year. And they're doing it for good reason, because that was fictional, this is real. These are the storm clouds viewed over Florida as a result of Hurricane Dorian. These are people in the Bahamas making their way through the floodwaters. Here's someone trying to escape to safety. And this is part of the problem, that when we get these scenes, we're gripped with this sort of apocalyptic imagination. And it's now been said so many times, I've seen it attributed to at least 6 different people, that it's easier to imagine the end of the world than a fundamental change to our economic system. So that's our task. But I'm going to argue that we can make some of these changes. In fact, we have made extraordinary changes before. In fact, we're much better at making and adapting to shifts than we very often give ourselves credit for. You know, it says in the Bible, here we are in the church, it says in the Bible, where there is no vision, the people perish. But what does this difference look like? So at a big level, you can refer to, well, I think one of the most interesting economists of the last century, John Maynard Keynes. He makes the point, rather appropriate for this sector, that ideas, knowledge, art, hospitality, travel, these are things which should of their nature be international. But let goods be homespun whenever it is reasonably and conveniently possible, and above all, and this is particularly notable in the long shadow of the financial crisis of 2008, he says, let finance be primarily national. Now, to take another economist, an explicitly ecological economist, when we ask what this looks like at a very practical level, he says this new world needs to be about an economy which is a subtle and complex economics of maintenance, qualitative improvements, sharing, frugality, and adaptation to natural limits. It is an economics of better, not bigger. Now, I've tried to think myself into the shoes of people who are working in your industry. So I asked myself, we've had a few exercises in imagination over the last couple of days. I asked myself that, if I close my eyes and try to imagine the perfect break or holiday, what sort of things drift into my mind? Well, and I think, first of all, I know what I don't want. I don't want to be like human luggage dumped at an airport or self-loading cargo, as the aviation industry charmingly calls us when we travel, waiting for luggage and miles from my actual destination. I don't want to be stuck in traffic on congested roads or walking around streets where toxic vehicle fumes fill my lungs. I don't want to have my view obscured by advertising boards wherever I look. And I don't want to be in a place that's not at ease with itself, because maybe it's highly unequal, where you sense and see division and exclusion and inequality. And I definitely don't want to be confronted with just shops instead of real culture, and especially row after row of identical international chain stores. So as a little exercise in imagination, I thought, okay, let's tick through those. Now, if I want to go to a place which is clean of advertising, the visual pollution of advertising. If I want to go somewhere that's kind of car-free. If I want to go somewhere where the economy is organized to maximize the value of all those transactions and to capture and keep the benefit of that, so maybe it's got its own local currency. If I want somewhere where decisions are made in a participatory fashion. If I want somewhere which has got 100% clean renewable energy. If I want somewhere where perhaps, its tourism is community-owned and community-based. I thought, that sounds like a bit of a fantasy. Sounds like a little bit of utopia. I thought, hang on a minute. Sao Paulo, not exactly a party-pooping city. Back in 2007, they banned public advertising. And then I thought, I remember, Oslo is decided to have its city centre go entirely car-free. And then I thought, back in my own neighbourhood, near where Rob comes from, Bristol has got its own local currency that maximises the economic benefit to local businesses. I think about a really green city that grows a lot of its own food. Since the oil crisis that struck it at the end of the Cold War, Havana in Cuba. I think about participatory ways of making decisions. I think of Porto Alegre. I think of clean energy. You can almost kind of take your pick now, the number of places that have got 100% renewable. But let's take Rhein-Hunsrück in Germany as just one example, or Sonderborg in Denmark. And for community-based tourism, Daniel mentioned some of these, some amazing examples in Ecuador and Bolivia, where The very facilities themselves are owned and run by the local community. So we know we need to work with people and organizations who understand that there is a climate and ecological emergency and want to be part of the solution. And we know that tourism could become a way in which we spend our time and money to enjoy lives that are more sustainable. But by spending on experiences through travel instead of consumption and just accumulating material goods, we could reduce our ecological footprints dramatically. We could also build greater international solidarity through more empathy and understanding of mutual interdependence. But this can only happen if tourism is deliberately and explicitly designed to achieve such outcomes, because as I mentioned, it is also an area of our lives responsible for some of the most climate damaging behavior, like flying. I'll talk a little bit about aviation and the problem with aviation, because whilst emissions from air travel account for a small proportion of total warming impacts at the moment, the harm they cause is roughly double the damage done by emissions at the ground level because of what scientists call radiative forcing. And they're sharply and persistently rising at national, regional, and global levels. So for the small minority of the global population who do fly regularly, air travel makes up the large bulk of their personal lifestyle emissions. And international aviation emissions are typically excluded from, or have been excluded from, the measures to try and tackle climate change. And air travel is kept artificially cheap through a range of international tax breaks and subsidies. There is no credible governmental or industry plan to reduce aviation emissions anywhere. And instead, these emissions are projected to at least triple between now and 2050. And there's also kind of a fundamentally flawed, scientifically and in every other way, offsetting scheme. Whenever you see the scheme, whenever you hear the word offsetting, and I don't know how this translates, but think more in terms of carbon laundering. It's never really doing what it says on the tin. You know, demand for flights grows at about 5% each year, whereas the carbon intensity of air travel only falls by less than 1%. The problem is getting worse. And the extraordinary thing is very concentrated in a tiny minority of the world's population. The best estimate I've seen is that in any given year, only between 2 and 3% of the global population will actually fly. So we're talking about the activities of a hypermobile elite. And in Britain, where we've done the numbers on this, 70% of all flights are taken by just 15% of the population. So we have a kind of a frequent flyer problem. But, you know, can we imagine living without aviation? I want to take you back to a day in 2010. Where I live in London, I live under a flight path. And I woke up one morning and something was missing, and I couldn't work out what it was. And what was missing was the sound of airplanes flying over where I live. And I turned on the radio, and I heard that a volcano had erupted far away in Iceland. It was called Eyjafjallajökull. And you thought West Flemish was tricky. So apologies if there are any native Icelandic speakers in the audience. I may have murdered it, but I think it sounds something roughly like that. And overnight, it was like a switch for the aviation industry had been turned to off. Something we'd come to take absolutely for granted was no longer available. And, you know, if you believe whatever he said about how we need and depend upon flying, you know, the sky should have fallen on our heads. But what actually happened was really rather interesting. Because, first of all, people adapted. They turned to social media. They car shared. They sofa surfed. They stayed with friends. Other transport networks put on additional capacity. Supermarkets that relied upon flying in luxury goods like salads and things like that for their shelves turned to local suppliers and took seasonal produce instead. Jens Stoltenberg, who was the Norwegian Prime Minister at the time, was stuck at the United Nations in New York. He ran his parliament from his iPad. So all of a sudden, and for several days, quite unknown to us, we had all this adaptive capacity, this resilience that meant we could change almost overnight. Now, of course, had it gone on for much longer, we would have had to do many other things to make adaptation possible. But it gave us a glimpse of a future which will now be inevitable because of climate change, where flying becomes the transport option of last resort and not the easy break that it's been up to now. Now, transport is an interesting example because if we look back through history, we see other instances in which we have changed how we travel very, very rapidly. In Britain, in the middle of the 19th century, in the space of just 7 years, we laid the foundations for the transport option which today has become the environmental choice. Railways. We laid 4,400 miles of railway track in just 7 years. Now, I can't do the kilometer calculation just like that, but it's like, that's going to be like 7,000 or 8,000 kilometers of track. Now, one example where Rob Hopkins, from the, who you heard from, where he lives in the southwest of England, in a single weekend, workers started work on upgrading about 180 miles of railway track, first thing on a Saturday morning on a weekend in May in 1892. They finished work at dawn on Monday morning, and the railway line opened. We were capable back then, when we didn't have computers and all that kind of stuff, of re-engineering our underlying superstructure, the kind of infrastructure that Michel talked about, upon which our lifestyle choices depend. And we did it like that. How did we lose the boldness and ability to make those changes? We can do that kind of stuff again. Now, there's other circumstances where there are external shocks to our lifestyles. We're hearing about the First World War earlier. I looked at what happened in Britain during the Second World War, and in a very compressed period of time, in just 6 years in Britain, we fundamentally changed how we lived and consumed. We used much less energy. We actually kind of ate less as well. But then strange things happened. We became healthier as a nation. Our life expectancy for people living non-combatants dramatically improved. Infant mortality improved. Maternal mortality dramatically improved. And even the experience of going through that transformational process laid the foundations for us to come up with a new social contract after the war. And we built the NHS, and we were capable of building over 200,000 social homes per year for decades afterwards under political administrations of both complexions. Now, okay, you might think, that's a little bit historical, but let's jump forward to some of the things which happened at the time of the financial crisis in 2007, 2008. Well, there, looking at another area of policy, economic policy changed almost overnight. You know, I come from England. It's the home of the kind of aggressive neoliberal Anglo-Saxon economies. Almost overnight, we renationalized most of our main high street banks. Overnight, we took the decision, having been told for decades that we couldn't afford X and Y and Z to help society, we found hundreds of billions of pounds to bail out the banks. Now, that money was very poorly used, but that money could have been used to pay for low-carbon transition, a reimagining of how our country ran. Now, in some interesting examples, in Utah in the United States, there was a Republican governor who had a real problem, couldn't afford, thought the municipality was going to go broke. So with only a few weeks' notice, he put all the public workers who were non-emergency workers onto a 4-day week. The mythical 4-day week. Well, it is where I come from, but we're looking forward to it. And they had the presence of mind to actually look at what happened as a consequence of doing that. And what they found was job absentee rates went down, staff satisfaction went up, people said they were having happier home lives. The public reported greater satisfaction with the delivery of services because they carefully thought out how to do it. And even though it wasn't the motivation, their carbon emissions came down in just a 6-month period by about 14%. So better quality of life, lower carbon emissions, a change delivered again, almost overnight. Now, I talked a little bit about Sao Paulo and getting rid of advertising. Now, we know from a lot of the research on well-being that when we're not constantly bombarded by advertising, it's actually incredibly good for our mental health. And being bombarded by advertising is very bad for children's mental health and ability to forge relationships. It undermines our well-being, and the absence of it allows us to flourish more as individuals. But it's not just Sao Paulo that has made moves to kind of get that kind of visual pollution away. And that also, interestingly, was driven by a Republican mayor. But Paris, too, has introduced many more restrictions, especially near schools, on advertising. The Indian city of Chennai banned billboard advertising. Grenoble in France recently banned commercial advertising in public spaces in the city streets to enhance opportunities for non-commercial expression. Several hundred advertising signs were replaced by tree planting and community notice boards. The problem with those cars, well, we've just introduced in London an ultra-low emission zone. We've seen sales of diesel cars fall 40% in a year. We've seen, as a consequence of controls on pollution, saving approximately 4 million life years because of the improvements in air quality. Things can happen really fast. The first car-free day in a big city was announced in the year 2000 with just a handful of cities. By 2018, last year, there were now 2,000 participating cities in over 46 countries around the world taking part. There's a car-free day every Sunday in Jakarta. There's been one since 2012. Bogota's Ciclovia program sees roughly 1 million people participate every week in walking, cycling, and exercising on its streets. That's about 1 in 8 of the city's population. Their events are now taking place at least twice a year in 496 cities across 27 countries of a similar nature. And as I mentioned, Oslo, give them a round of applause, are going car-free in the city centre this year. Now, it's possible through doing things which seem kind of quite practical, like that, to have far more profound regeneration happening in a community. Medellin in Colombia. Before 1990, there was no public space in Medellin. It was a dangerous place with a high crime and murder rate. And then they decided to change that and expand their public space. And what they found in just a couple of decades, that going from a situation that by doing that, the murder rate in Medellin fell from about 375 people per 100,000 in 1991 to just 20 in 2015. And what they did was extraordinary. They established a green belt which circles the highlands of the city, covering about 65 hectares, footpaths, bike lanes, ecological restoration of native ecosystems, sustainable housing. They sought to include the communities living around the green belt, providing employment and educational opportunities. And as a consequence of that, and they introduced this kind of brilliant thing, which they deliberately set out to connect the most deprived communities with the very heart of the city. And they did it using a network. I think I might even have a picture of this somewhere. They used a sort of a, oh, no, that's Eje Fjetlige Kutsk. They used cable cars. And they physically and mentally connected the different parts of the city. And this resulted in not only Medellin becoming a key steering group member of the Climate 40 group of cities, but it's also a traveler's choice now on TripAdvisor, where they say, once infamous for dangerous gangs and drug activity, Medellin has been transformed. It's now a vibrant destination for travelers seeking a culturally rich vacation. I was going to talk a little bit about Costa Rica, but I'm just going to say it really, really quickly, because Costa Rica has done the most extraordinary thing in terms of renewable energy. And not only that, one of the organizations I used to work for, the New Economics Foundation, we produced a measure which looked at life expectancy, life satisfaction, and ecological footprint, and we called it the Happy Planet Index. And Costa Rica came top of it one year. It does incredibly well. And Costa Rica has had this incredibly ambitious plan to get the entire electricity grid on renewables. And in 2015, 99% of its electricity came from renewable sources. It's been doing these kind of incredible things. So there's just a little bit of flavor about that kind of big, deep infrastructure around which we work. But the other reason, I think, why I feel hope in the face of these seemingly impossible challenges of climate change and inequality and the undermining of our well-being is that we know that people have extraordinary abilities to change behavior. And you can look at this by looking at some of the other areas of literature which aren't often connected with climate change. But we look at it, for example, in the habits of the way that smoking has changed. In Britain in the 1970s, about half the population smoked. Now it's only about less than 1 in 5. There's been extraordinary leaps forward in terms of things which were once talked about in apocalyptic circumstances, like HIV and AIDS. The death rate has been falling dramatically. Public health campaigns around drink driving have transformed the safety of our roads. And there's other changes too, if you look around. Repair cafes, that shift to the regenerative recycling and reuse culture, stepping away from disposable materialism. The first repair cafe, modern version, as opposed to the old places where we used to just take stuff to get repaired, came about in 2009. There's now over 1,700 of them. The movement for divestment from fossil fuels. The first active act of fossil fuel divestment was just in 2012, just 7 years ago. The 1,000th was last year. Every day, almost in the financial pages, you'll see people taking money out of fossil fuels. The Transition Town network that Rob helped establish, they only set it up in 2006. Now there's somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 transition towns in about 50 countries. We've been talking about plastic as environmentalists for decades. Suddenly, single-use plastics are off the table. And that happened almost like that. One of my favorites, I've been a vegetarian since I was a kid, and I always feel a bit funny coming to Europe because, my God, you eat a lot of meat. But the new kid on the block in terms of diet, and it's certainly the case in the UK, has been the rise of the vegan. You might say the vegans have landed. And the moment when we really knew this, and obviously the reason for mentioning that is that it's the lowest impact diet you can have. We've got this baker it's a big chain baker in Britain called Greggs. And it's kind of got a reputation for providing really working class food. And almost as a joke, they introduced a vegan sausage roll. To their absolute astonishment, it was so successful that within days, they had sold out. Their supply chain was not prepared to deal with it. It's now turned around their financial fortunes, and every other major fast food provider is looking at vegan alternatives. This has happened kind of like that. There's been other massive shifts too in things like, everyday sexism, etc., etc. And we talked a lot about aviation. And we've heard a lot about the heroes of the new movement, like Greta Thunberg, of course, and she very deliberately and very publicly decided when she traveled to the British Parliament earlier this year to come by train. Never underestimate the demonstration effect, the social contagion effect of people doing things differently like that. In just 4 months after Greta did that, the number of people taking flights in Sweden went down 8%. The number of people taking trains went up 8%. You probably know this, but the Swedish have a word, flygskam, which means flight shame. But they have another word as well. I'll probably say it wrong. It's something like tagskrit, which means kind of like train boasting, train bragging. Did I mention I came by train? I came by train. Just mentioning, just putting that out there. I came by train. So we're in this situation now where climate emergency declarations are happening everywhere. Extinction Rebellion is kind of everywhere. I knew Extinction Rebellion was a big thing. One of the holidays I go on each year is I take the train to Scotland. I think I might have a picture of it. There we go. I take the sleeper train, one of the few sleeper trains. Bring back sleeper trains across Europe, I say. I take the sleeper train from London up to Scotland. And I went to Fort William. Fort William is a place in Scotland. It's quite bleak. Even in Fort William, they had Extinction Rebellion posters up with their calls to tell the truth about climate change. So I knew something was happening. Extinction Rebellion activists are at Heathrow Airport today. So if you're thinking about how the sector reimagines itself, you've got to think about the potential risks to things that have been taken for granted. What if we very suddenly and very quickly stopped flying? There's other signs of great promise as well. Big, broad policy packages like the Green New Deal, which has been pushed by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in the United States, and it's now, to be a Democratic candidate in the United States now, you've got to be in favor of the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal is a rapid, bold, low-carbon transition plan. Get ready for that kind of thing happening. We are introducing a Green New Deal bill into Parliament in Britain in the next few days, and there are moves across Europe to do the same sorts of things. I'm just going to round up now. I've got a couple of minutes. I'm just going to think about what specifically might we do. I just want to throw a couple of things out, a couple of ideas. Well, obviously what we've got to do is model best practice, because the tourism sector is just another part of life more generally. So it's all about answering that question, how will we live in the world, which allows everybody to thrive without transgressing planetary boundaries and pulling the ecological rug from under our feet. So what we've got to do, obviously, model best practice, reinforce and amplify what is already happening around you. Why? Well, because it's good business sense, and you'll be stranded when the changes happen if you don't. You catch the zeitgeist, you surf the wave. These changes represent aspirational shifts that people want to make, so move with the visitor, even get ahead of the game. We all know the benefit of the first mover advantage. Create momentum. This is around, zero carbon, it's around diet, it's around models of ownership, it's around localization, and around experience. And we need to look at those activities where the risks are biggest, like flying. And I wondered, I was thinking about Hurricane Dorian and the Bahamas, and the Bahamas has obviously been a major tourist destination for many, many years. I thought another thing that the sector could look at is twinning as a way of showing solidarity. You could almost call it transition twinning. I first thought about this when we did a climate exercise with one of the poorest boroughs in London called Herbekijk. It's also one of the most diverse. There's over 180 languages spoken there. Many families and relatives will have people living in Bangladesh and places that are on the front line of climate breakdown. Look for places you can twin with. Share ideas, share best practice, share solidarity, empathy, sympathy. Now, it's a statement of the obvious that the places that people like to visit on a holiday are also among those places most vulnerable to climate breakdown, whether it's hotspots in cities and heat waves or flood-prone coastal resorts, ski locations losing snow, etc. But we can build greater international solidarity through greater empathy and understanding of our mutual interdependence. And I love the idea that's come through over the last couple of days about one of our greatest challenges is managing expectations. I love the idea of the modern pilgrimage. And of course, the thing about long-distance travel, the thing about the pilgrimage, is that it's something you don't do every year. You maybe do it once in a lifetime, twice in a lifetime. What I wanted to finish with is just to say, first of all, that with the richness of knowledge and understanding in this room, we'd love to hear from you. For the Rapid Transition Alliance, any stories you have of changes that have been happening quickly that you'd like to share. We're an alliance of now about 50, 60 international organizations working at all kinds of different levels. We'd love to tell your story, so please get in touch, and you can get in touch via the website. It's time for us to start imagining the world afresh and see those opportunities for change. We need belief and we need hope. This year is the 150th anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi's birth. Gandhi said, "I do not want my house to be walled in or my windows blocked. I want the cultures of all lands to be blown about the house as freely as possible. but I also refuse to be blown off my feet by any. My final thought I'd like to leave you with is this idea that we must have the confidence of our convictions. We must believe in the possibility of change. We know it's there because change has happened before. It will happen again. It's down to us to condition how it happens. So really, as a last thought, Bruggelings, I'm going to leave you with the words of, I think, one of the best writers writing at the moment, a woman called Rebecca Solnit, who wrote a book called Hope in the Dark. I really recommend it. It gets the perfect balance between being realistic about the scale of the challenge we face, but believing firmly in our resilient ability to deal with it. And she says this. She says, hope is not a lottery ticket. You can sit on the sofa and clutch, feeling lucky. It's an axe you break down doors with in an emergency. Hope should shove you out the door because it will take everything you have to steer the future away from endless war and from the annihilation of the earth's treasures and the grinding down of the poor and marginal. To hope, she says, is to give yourself to the future. And that commitment to the future is what makes the present inhabitable. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sims. I think we do have time for some questions, if you like. And if you like, ladies and gentlemen, go ahead. After this very inspiring keynote.
I should say,
Heeft u nog vragen?
while anybody's thinking of a question, when I'm at home, I use this kind of travel mug. We call it a smug mug. But it's the same color as a really cheap and very potent kind of beer that you can buy in London. So when I go around, people, I think I basically look like an alcoholic. I can tell you, I've only got water in there at the moment.
Oké, goed. We gaan hem niet verdenken van alcohol te drinken uit deze groene beker. Is er nog iemand die een vraag heeft? Of bent u na 2 dagen een beetje moe? Dat zou ook wel best kunnen natuurlijk. Mr. Wall, the microphone is arriving. Okay.
Thank you for this really inspiring talk. The Rapid Transition Alliance, so on the website you also tell the stories you mentioned, and is there a book or other resources how to share these stories yet?
So, that's very nice, because that's kind of like an invitation just to chat a little bit more about the Alliance. So what we're doing is, we're doing 3 things, really. We are building the evidence base of hope for a warming world. Stories of success and understanding what it is that has enabled things to successfully change at speed, and the kind of things that can change to go to scale as well. Secondly, we're building a community of interest around the idea of rapid change, people who believe in the possibility of rapid change and are trying to make it happen. And we want that to grow. So if you're a member of an organization that would like to become part of the Rapid Transition Alliance, and you kind of are happy with the sort of the mission statement that you can find on the website, well then please join. What we're engaged with at exactly this moment, to answer Daniel's question, is bringing together, now that we've built up a reasonable basis of stories of rapid change, we are producing what we're calling a living guide to rapid transition, so that we can look sector by sector, theme by theme. What are the circumstances which allow these kind of changes to happen quickly? And learning from best practice, and that might be at a big policy level, it might be at a very granular local level, and we're bringing those together. One additional thing that we're doing is looking for policy ideas which can make big shifts even more possible. One of the things that we did in that light last year is launch the idea for, last year was the 50th anniversary of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And one of the things that we do know in tackling climate change and the ecological crisis is that we've got to leave fossil fuels in the ground. So we floated the idea that there should be a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. We should build no more extractive capacity, and we should look at ways of building no more infrastructure that's dependent upon fossil fuels either. So we're building a community of interest, we're building an evidence base, we're diving into the world of policy and politics to try and move things forward. And what we understand is, again, it's this important of the social contagion effect. It matters most of all, almost above anything else, that we talk about what we're doing with this. Because the more other people hear it, the more they will talk about it too. And you never know the moment when you get to the inflection point, the tipping point, where what used to be unimaginable suddenly becomes the social norm. I would say we're seeing that around flying at the moment. I predict that in a very short period of time, flying will become something that we sat there thinking, what were we thinking? Anyway.
Okay. Thank you. Another question, ladies and gentlemen? Not immediately. I think everybody is really very impressed. And that I think you made your point, that's for sure.
That's what my mother always used to say.
Sorry?
Andrew, you've made your point. Now please shut up.
Okay, so I'm going to thank you. Mr. Sims, thank you for being with us, and thank you for your very inspiring keynote. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
And to complete this summit, I would like to invite Anna Pollock and Michel van den Riesen on the stage, because they do want to share their conclusions with you.
Well, thank you, and thank to you personally for, should I do this? Seem to have an echo. Thank you for staying and still being with us. I don't know about you, but my head is completely full. And I don't really feel I have many wise comments to add. We've had so many insights in the last 2 days. So actually it's really appropriate for me to just say thank you. Thank you to you for being here, for staying and sharing generously of your ideas. What we haven't been able to do today and yesterday is feed back all of the creative ideas that came out of the workshops. That was your opportunity too, but we will be recording, we have recorded what went on, and that will all be shared with you as part of the follow-up for this. But what I really wanted to do quickly was to thank some of the, first of all, I'd like to thank the speakers and thank Visit Flanders for trusting me to make the decision as to who should be invited. And my speakers have certainly not let me down or you down at all. They've been fantastic. First of all, Daniel, for sharing your encyclopedic knowledge and in such a balanced way. And most importantly, I think, for giving us the idea that tourism doesn't have to be a victim. Tourism actually can become a transformation agent, really significantly contributing to how humanity evolves and grows. Our job, therefore, is not just to change the rules, but it's actually to change the game. And I think you started by helping us see that was possible. Michel, thank you for showing a new way of seeing the world. A lovely, organic, messy way of seeing the world, where things happen emergently. We don't have to control everything. We have to put people together and have ideas flow and allow all of that exciting innovation that Andrew just described to emerge. So that also can mean that we can start to play. And didn't Rob help us understand the power of play, the power of imagination, the power of closing your eyes and just going on that journey? Try it out with your children when you get home and just see the kind of results that come out of that. And finally to Andrew, who packed, I don't know, I lost count. I mean, you couldn't count, could you? All of the positive examples he packed into 25, 30 minutes of people doing positive things to make a positive difference. And I hope you're leaving with a sense the kind of change, the magnitude of change we need is possible. Just very quickly, it's not a housekeeping, it's a plug, and I can do that for my speakers. You only got a fraction of their knowledge in 2 days. They've all written fantastic books. Now, Daniel's may have a few left in your bag, so if anyone wants one, he has to leave in an hour, so now's your chance. Michelle brought a few at her expense, and they're quite heavy, and we don't want to have to take them back to Canada. So there are a few at the back, if you would like to take one, and honestly, it's a fantastic read, so I would encourage you. Rob's book is coming out, and he gave you postcards, but go onto his website, it's full of great stuff. And Andrew has just come out with a new book on economics, and you can go on to the rapid transition, there's tons of stuff there. So very quickly, I also really want to give a very personal thanks to Visit Flanders, not only for trusting me and helping curate that aspect of the program, but just as importantly, for researching and bringing together such inspiring examples of what's going on in Flanders. You have every reason to be confident, every reason to be proud. We heard from the Proftoon and the regions what they're doing, the cities what they're doing. The two examples that were presented this morning, these are first-class examples, and they will gain a huge amount of attention and admiration. So the question I want to leave you with is it change or is it really transformation? And what I loved about this book, and this was again created by Els Meerschert and Marianne Chapman and a couple of other people, and forgive me if I'm not naming you, Sarah from Supermoon, who did the creative. This beautiful travelogue, it's nothing been like this created in a tourism conference before. It's a legacy piece. I hope you agree with that. But on page 37, you have a wonderful picture of a caterpillar, and the quote that says, "What the caterpillar calls the end, the rest of the world calls a butterfly." So as my parting piece, I'd like to tell you the story of the caterpillar. It's a story from science, because we never did understand how you could get this slug of an animal on its belly turn into a fluttering butterfly. And this is how it happens. It literally lies on its stomach and eats its way through life until it can't eat anymore. It's stuffed. And then, of course, like all of us after Sunday lunch, it wants to go to sleep. So it does. It hangs itself upside down, and then it builds this amazing cocoon. And the caterpillar goes to sleep. Now, inside that caterpillar are little imaginal cells, parts with different DNA to that of the caterpillar. They've been there all along, almost sleeper cells, if you like. They start to wake up. And the caterpillar's body starts to reject, and it kills them off. One over here, kill it off, kill it off. Its immune system's doing what it was designed to do. But these imaginal cells keep popping up, and then they start to hold hands. They pop up and they hold hands. And the immune system of the caterpillar cannot get rid of them anymore. And when all of those imaginal cells, those individuals, finally are fully joined up, strangely enough, a new form is there. It's the butterfly. And it now has the strength to break out of the cocoon and fly away. Now, I think that's the most beautiful story I think it's the most powerful metaphor of where we're at in tourism as humanity on the planet. And with that, I'm going to pass over to my good friend, Michel. Thank you.
Dank u, Anna. Ja, allemaal. Ik ben, zoals ik in het begin gezegd heb, ook maar een jongen uit de sector. En toen we hieraan begonnen, samen met Anna, had ik zowat de vraag, gaan we met een goed gevoel na die 2 dagen in Brugge naar huis vertrekken. En ik denk en ik hoop dat dat voor jullie allemaal, voor mij is dat alleszins toch zo, dat dat het geval is. En dat wij allemaal een beetje die cellen zijn die misschien in die rups nog gevangen zitten, maar dat we wegvliegen als die vlinders. En ik heb daarvoor een paar gevoelens die ik nog eventjes wil meegeven als afsluiting. Verander vanaf vandaag uw taalgebruik. Er staan een aantal tips daarvoor in het boekje Reizen naar Morgen. En ik heb een tweetal die ik zo naar voren wil brengen. Ik hoor, en wij doen dat als Vlamingen vaak, wij zeggen dikwijls naar de toekomst toe. En iets toedoen, dat is iets sluiten. Hè? Laat ons vanaf vandaag zeggen naar de toekomst, want anders sluiten we die af. Verander het taalgebruik. En een tweede is, laat ons stoppen, wij dan, met te spreken over de toeristische industrie. Want het is die industrie die eigenlijk die machine is waar Michel ons over praatte. De machine van fast money, bad products. En daar moeten we uit. Dat is onze opponent. Want wij zijn hier vandaag een beetje de grond aan het leggen, de wortels van misschien wel een maatschappelijke toeristische beweging. Een tegenbeweging tegen die industrie. En wij willen andere dingen naar voren brengen. En we hebben geleerd, denk ik, dat in de job waar wij zitten als toerismemaker, dat daar zoveel raakvlakken zijn met heel die samenleving. En dat is toch wel iets belangrijk om mee te nemen. Een tweede punt, voor uzelf en voor mij ook. We moeten durven te veranderen. Hè? Doe een inspanning om anders te kijken, om meerwaarde te realiseren. Het is hier vaak gezegd vanuit ons eigen DNA. We zijn trots. Ik heb hier veel mensen met fierheid en trots over hun job horen praten en over de uitdagingen waar ze voor staan. Doe dat ook. Wees creatief, met veel verbeelding en wees koppig. Want je gaat heel veel weerstand krijgen in je omgeving. Maar wees koppig, want weet dat om sporen te trekken, dat je daar dwarsliggers voor nodig hebt. Dus we gaan daarin vooruit om van die reizigers ook die pelgrims te maken en wij hebben daar een belangrijke rol in te spelen. En ten derde, een beetje de vraag ook naar het agentschap Toerisme Vlaanderen, waar we zo blij om zijn dat dit initiatief hier genomen is. Denk ik dat ik namens u allen, en ik richt mij niet alleen naar Peter, maar naar het hele agentschap, een uitnodiging mogen formuleren om dit proces echt verder te coachen. Dat dit niet stilvalt na vandaag. En dat we kunnen gefaciliteerd worden in het uitbouwen van zo'n maatschappelijke toeristische beweging met die grote transformatie waar we allemaal als vlinders onze rol in spelen. En voor Toerisme Vlaanderen, denk ik, is het ook belangrijk van de relatie tussen global en local om dit ook in het oog te houden. Doe het met heel veel locals. Maak een netwerk, ook internationaal, want ik ben ook blij dat hier mensen waren van over de grens. Inspireer ons, maak een kenniscentrum om ons te versterken. Breng ons samen, creëer condities om dat allemaal mogelijk te maken. En misschien pas ook uw structuren aan om dit op korte termijn, om Toerisme Vlaanderen ook wat te transformeren in dit traject. Het zijn een paar ideeën die zomaar bij mij opkwamen na die 2 dagen en die ik u wel nog even wou meegeven. Wij hopen ook dat het Vlaamse toeristische beleid minstens ook aandacht geeft aan deze transformatie. En als dat zo mag zijn straks, dan gaan we echt wel de goede richting uit. Ik zou u allemaal willen bedanken, vooral ook Anna, want ik ben blij dat ik heb mogen meewerken aan dit inspirerende project. Ik heb daar echt wel enorm veel van opgestoken. Ik ben een klein beetje meer expert geworden. Ik was dat gisteren, heb ik u gezegd dat ik dat niet was, maar ben het nu een beetje meer geworden in de fijne discussies die we gehad hebben voor de uitbouw van dit programma, waar u hopelijk veel van genoten hebt. Ik wil u daarvoor bedanken voor uw aanwezigheid. Ik vond het fijn en we gaan elkaar zeker in dit netwerk nog ontmoeten in de toekomst. Dank je wel.
Anna, thank you so much. Michel van den Driessen. Wie ook nog heel graag een woordje tot u wil richten is de sterke man, zoals we hem noemen, van Toerisme Vlaanderen, Peter de Wilde.
Opnieuw sta ik tussen jullie en een receptie. Of een trein, dus ik ga het kort houden. Ik besef dat jullie hoofden vol zitten, maar ik moet zeggen dat mijn hoofd compleet leeg is. Ik was naar hier gekomen om veel te absorberen, maar ik had mij voorgenomen om te proberen ook heel veel terug te geven. En ik heb gegeven wat erin zat. En nu is er terug veel plek om heel veel nieuwe dingen opnieuw de komende weken en maanden mee te nemen. En dat is ook wat wij beloven als Toerisme Vlaanderen. We hebben de resultaten van de afgelopen dagen, de vruchten van jullie werk, hebben wij nodig om naar de volgende jaren toe mee die creativiteit die essentieel zal zijn om de toekomst van het toerisme te maken, om die mee te voeden. Dus ik wil jullie allemaal van harte danken daarvoor, voor jullie aanwezigheid. En succes heeft heel veel vaders en mislukking is een wees. Dus ik moet heel veel vaders of moeders bedanken vandaag. Ik wil beginnen toch speciaal met Christophe te bedanken. Christophe, ik weet dat er veel grijze haren zijn bijgekomen, maar ik weet ook dat jouw bezieling mee de ziel van deze plek en de ziel van al die plekken die we ook gisteren hebben gezien, dat dat een cadeau is geweest van jouw visie aan ieder hier aanwezig. Hartelijk dank daarvoor. Ik wil Jeffrey van Hulle graag bedanken, van de eventorganizer, zonder wie dit allemaal veel moeilijker zou geweest zijn en die ook als fiere Bruggeling ook het beste van zichzelf heeft gegeven. Wij zijn daar allemaal diep van onder de indruk en wij hebben wel al wat meegemaakt. Dus Jeffrey, ook jij en je team bedankt. Ik wil de mensen van Supermoon ook graag bedanken voor de geweldige communicatie en de geweldige inspiratie die we van hen hebben gekregen. Ik wil Andrea ook heel graag bedanken. Andrea, het feit dat jij je passie mee elke dag ook waarmaakt in het onthalen van mensen of in het onderdak verschaffen aan mensen die de plekken die ook jij graag ziet willen komen bewonderen, dat maakt jou een fantastische ambassadeur. En ik heb je heel graag nog eens bezig gezien. Het deed mij denken aan al die mooie avonden dat ik je elke avond op tv zag. Dank je wel. Wie we veel te vaak vergeten, dat zijn de jongens achteraan en de jongens hier achteraan. Jongens en meisjes. Want de tolken horen daar ook bij. Ik wil onze tolken die ons vertolkt hebben wat hier gebeurd is. En de techniekers die ervoor gezorgd hebben dat die klank tot bij jullie is geraakt. En jullie ook heeft geraakt, hoop ik. Die wil ik ook van harte danken. Onze internationale sprekers. I specifically also want to thank our international guests and our international speakers. Anna, Daniel, Herman. Well, Herman is an international by heart. Michel, Rob, and Andrew. Thank you so much for sharing your inspiration, sharing your vision, and I hope we can keep communicating about what is alive here and what you also have woken up. Anna, I specifically want to thank you for this journey that we undertook since 2 years. I remember the first session we did, and for some of us it was really a shock. But not seeing you, also seeing you, but it was a shock what you had to say, and you woke up quite some strong feelings in a lot of people. So your role has been essential these past 2 years. We are extremely grateful for that, and I feel we're strong also thanks to you now. Ik denk, en dan ga ik er nu, en dat is geen teken van ondankbaarheid, maar een teken van dorst. Ik ga er nu proberen iets sneller door te gaan. De moderatoren en de sprekers allemaal bedanken. Heel in het bijzonder onze lieve collega's van de proeftuinen, omdat ik weet dat zij eigenlijk de pioniers zijn die in de frontlinie zijn gaan staan. Ik mag ook de stad Brugge en de vroede vaderen en moederen van deze stad, burgemeester en schepenen, niet vergeten om hen te bedanken voor de warme ondersteuning en voor de visie die ze eigenlijk ontplooien, want het is een visie die op één lijn staat met die van Toerisme Vlaanderen. Ik wil onze collega's van Toerisme Brugge een hart onder de riem steken en zeggen dat we de komende jaren bij alles wat we gaan meemaken, dat we er samen voor staan en dat we er ook samen zullen doorgeraken. Ik wil alle 4 plekhouders die we gisteravond hebben gezien, ook bedanken. Ik weet niet of ze hier zijn, maar ik weet zeker dat Jeffrey dat zal doorgeven. Ik denk dat de ervaringen die we gisteravond hebben gehad een verrijking en een illustratie waren met de boodschap die we willen brengen, dat het passioneel delen van de ziel van een plek, dat nu is waar wij allemaal in geloven en mee bezig willen zijn. Ik wil alle ondernemers die hier zijn heel expliciet bedanken. Ik weet dat dat niet evident is van jullie zaak 2 dagen achter te laten of 1 dag achter te laten. En ondertussen natuurlijk hier te komen inspireren, maar ondertussen moet er ook wel brood op de plank komen. Dat is niet evident. Wij beseffen dat en wij hopen dat jullie daar ook iets van meerwaarde uit mogen meenemen. Alle politici, alle beleidsmakers, dank jullie wel. En het is nu ook voor een stuk aan jullie om die ambities te gaan waarmaken. Alle toerismeprofessionals hier aanwezig, alle kennisinstellingen binnen- en buitenland. En ik sluit af met mijn team van Toerisme Vlaanderen. En zij weten dat. Ik ben er altijd een beetje emotioneel van. Maar zij worden heel weinig bedankt. Ik vergeet ze heel vaak in speeches. En daarom wil ik ze ook eens expliciet bedanken. Ik zie jullie graag. Dank je wel. Tot slot, er was een soundtrack bij heel het gebeuren. Dat hebben we gisteravond meegemaakt. Wannes Capelle, die ons hier heeft komen verblijden. Voor mij was het een ontdekking. Sorry. Maar het is iemand die de ziel van de plek hier nog sterker heeft gemaakt en die heel sterk heeft laten spreken. En het is dan niet meer dan passend, denk ik, dat ik ook de behoeders van de ziel van deze plek als laatste, maar ook als meest prominente wil bedanken. En dat is de gemeenschap van de Paters Capucijnen hier ter plekke. Pater Klaas, dank jullie wel. Ik ga jou even het woord geven, omdat jij de vertegenwoordiger van je gemeenschap bent. En ik weet dat jullie de afgelopen dagen, wanneer de techniekers aan de slag waren, die mensen koffie hebben gebracht, soep hebben gemaakt, vertroeteld hebben. Maar ik weet ook dat jullie in de intenties van het middaggebed er hebben aan gedacht om ons alle succes en inspiratie toe te wensen. En dat gaat recht naar het hart. Dank je wel. Dus ik geef u als laatste het woord.
Dank u wel, Peter. Ik wil deze congresdag over het toerisme sluiten met 3 antwoorden op 3 nieuwsgierige vragen wellicht van u. Wie zijn die gastheren hier van dit huis? Wat is dat hier voor een huis? En waar staan we samen voor? Beste mensen, u was de gast in een kerk. In een kloosterkerk van Capucijnen. Capucijnen, volgelingen van Franciscus van Assisi. Een kerk die al meer dan 100 jaar bestaat, waarin altijd diensten zijn geweest en die op deze dagen, als het ware hun deuren hebben opengezet voor mensen die daar niet kwamen om vanuit godsdienstige overwegingen even stil te vallen, maar die kwamen om te luisteren. Te luisteren, wat betekent het een mens te zijn in de toeristische sector, een mens te zijn voor deze wereld. U was de gast bij Capucijnen. Capucijnen, ik mag de huisoverste zijn van hier, zijn volgelingen van Franciscus. En Franciscus heeft een lofzang geschreven op de schepping. Laudato si, geloofd zijt gij, o Heer. Onze huidige paus heeft in 2015 een encycliek geschreven. Dat is normaal van pausen. Vroeger schreven ze altijd in het Latijn. Onze huidige paus, Franciscus, schreef voor het eerst zijn encycliek in het Italiaans. Met als titel Laudato si, overgenomen van Franciscus van Assisi. Lof aan God Heer voor heel uw schepping, dat wij broederschap mogen worden. En hij schreef, de ondertitel van die encycliek was om de zorg voor een bewoonbare wereld. Ik denk dat u mensen uit de toeristische sector als het ware iets hebt van broederschap vormen. Mensen bij elkaar brengen rond het mooie en het schone. Mensen in kleine sectoren, segmenten als het ware bij elkaar brengen om het schone en het goede en het waarachtige van mensen naar boven te laten komen. Ik heb al 2 vragen beantwoord. Waar bent u geweest en wie was de gastheer? En het laatste heb ik zojuist beantwoord. Waar staan we samen voor? Voor een bewoonbare wereld. Ik dank jullie. Ik dank jullie dat je hier in onze kerk, in deze gewijde ruimte, als het ware met elkaar hebt gesproken over hoe maken wij deze wereld bewoonbaar vanuit onze visie en vanuit onze taak. Dank u wel.
Bijzonder mooie woorden waarvan ik aan uw gezichten kan zien dat ze recht naar uw hart gaan. Zowel van Peter als van pater Klaas. Heel hartelijk dank daarvoor. Het is echt niet dat ik het laatste woord wil hebben. Ik weet dat dat een bijzonder onherroepelijke gewoonte is. Maar ik moet toch nog heel even een kleine praktische mededeling doen. En dat is u vragen om de Leave Behind kaartjes, de reisverslagen uit uw reflectieboekje, om die achter te laten in de Reizen naar Morgen reiskoffer bij de uitgang van de Sint-Godelieve Abdij. Omdat jullie input, maar dat hebben we al voldoende gezegd, ontzettend belangrijk is om dit traject verder te zetten. Ik moet u ook nog even vertellen dat u al de sessies kan herbekijken op YouTube en op de Reizen naar Morgen website en de Facebookpagina. Die zullen ook een levendige bron van inspiratie blijven. Ik wil u op mijn beurt ook nog heel hartelijk danken voor uw aanwezigheid en voor uw enthousiasme en voor uw luisterbereidheid. En ik wens u nog een hele fijne avond en een heel fijn weekend. En heel graag tot ziens. En heel veel succes in alles wat u wilt ondernemen nog. Tot ziens. Bye bye.